into the wider community of the cathedral and beyond on this great I don't know, project isn't quite initiative, ministry, groundbreaking. So it's good to have you here. It's good. How is life for you in London these days?
So Dean, as you all are talking, I'm just going to let everyone in, all right?
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Sean Sebastian,
yes,
life is good these days?
Yeah, very nice. It's quite rainy these days, but it's London's beautiful. London's beautiful.
Wonderful.
I enjoy it.
Welcome everybody.
Hi.
We're loading up here. It's sort of like getting the passengers on board the train as we get ready to pull out of the station. I see familiar faces and friendly faces. Good morning. Look at there.
Morning, Dean. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you. Thank you. A good day. A good day. And having the community update always makes it a better day.
Us too.
It's a better day. So that's
well,
good.
As we're Tyler, have the majority of participants been let in from the waiting room?
It looks like most people, but there's a couple more folks who are trickling in.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think you can get started, Priscilla.
Okay, great. So we're going to mute everyone for a bit until we come back on. And want to go ahead and do that? Okay, well, welcome everyone. And I want to start just by reiterating what the Dean said, that it's really joyous for us when we all come together. And we're just delighted to see you all here. Some housekeeping notes. We're going to unmute everyone at about 12:30 when we start the Q&A. You can still use the chat function if you'd prefer to pose your question that way, or just raise your hand and feel free to talk directly to the Dean or Pat. And we're going to be going a little longer today till about 12:45, since it has been so long since we've all gathered together. And since that time, there's been, as you know, a resurgence in COVID. There's been a terrible political unrest surrounding the election. And then, of course, the awful incident at the cathedral following our Christmas concert that really has left a mark on so many people, both within and without the cathedral community. So the Dean and Pat will certainly address some of those incidents, but we also have a joyous occasion to celebrate, which is this wonderful new endeavor that Father Malloy is leading. He's the sub-dean of the cathedral. And I think you'll all be really heartened by the message of unity and spirituality and giving that this endeavor is really going to bring out into the city. So I'm going to throw it over to Dean Daniel, and we will start our update.
Great. Welcome, everybody. I put on my face mask, not for protective purposes, but to show you this little logo here that says, "Love must act." And it's from an educational ministry in South Africa named Love Must Act. And as I was thinking about this morning, it put me in mind that love must always act. So we're here today to talk about a number of ways, not all the ways, but many of the ways in which love is acting here at the cathedral. And this is, the cathedral, as you know, is a shining city set on a hill, the great cathedral of New York. And we are continuing our tradition of ministry and involvement and witness in ways that I think are vital and life-giving and exciting. So let me talk a little bit about those just for the next couple of minutes. We're still, as you know, in the midst of the COVID pandemic, and we are taking every precaution. We are caring for our staff, caring for the students at the school, caring for those who visit the cathedral in this great surge. We are living our way through it, and we're praying our way through it. And I invite you to pray your way, add your prayers to ours as we deal with this terrible event. The cathedral is not, as you know, open for public worship at the present. It is open daily for individual visits and for prayer and meditation, but that is all. We're thinking about reopening the cathedral for public worship probably no earlier than June 6th. So if circumstances change, we'll certainly reopen as we are able to do so safely for staff and visitors and members of the cathedral. The shooting on December 13 after the Christmas concert, it was shocking. I've never had an experience quite like that before. By the time the shooting began, I saw the man standing on the top of the steps with a gun in each hand, shooting into the air. He never aimed at a person. And as the bishop and I, who were already down on the sidewalk, were walking away, a man fell and hit his head on the curb, and we stopped to render what assistance we could until while the shooting was going on. And I remember kneeling there wondering, I wonder what it feels like to be shot. It's funny where your mind goes in those moments. And as I was thinking that, our security detail grabbed the bishop and me and hustled us off away. He said, "You're a big target. We got to get you out of here." So we went up to the gate and so on. I've spoken with the police, the precinct captain, and I'm getting ready to meet with the two policemen who responded most quickly. They were the only two on the scene at that point. I'm planning on speaking with them in the next few days to thank them. They were on the spot, ready, and they did what they had to do, sad as it was. I've also reaching out to the family of the shooter, who had a history of mental illness, and just to say we're not in the business of judging here. We're in the business of reconciliation and helpfulness, and what might we do here at the cathedral to be helpful to you and your family in this difficult time in your life. So I think we've responded in a way that Jesus would have us respond. We've been very careful to go through with the staff, to offer resources to them, to help them through what may be a very difficult experience for them. We've offered counseling resources, both here at the cathedral and outside the cathedral, for people to talk about it and process it as they need to. How is love acting in other ways? Well, the cathedral's acting. We're providing space for blood donors here in the cathedral, mostly staff from Miriam Hospital just next door. I've told Art Gianelli, the president of Mount Sinai, that if the surge goes to a point where it's necessary, the cathedral is still open and ready to provide hospital space as needed upon a moment's notice. And that invitation stands, and it is appreciated. We're planning a gun buyback as part of the response to the sad event, tragic event on the 13th of December. We're planning, in conjunction with the police department, a gun buyback here at the cathedral. And that tragic event also made us aware of the thinness of the safety net for mental health issues in our city and indeed in our nation. I don't have any action plan for that, but we're thinking about how we might play some part in improving health care, mental health care for those who suffer mental illness. There's a quiet program of love in action here at the cathedral. It's a small program. It doesn't receive publicity. We don't want it to. It's refugee housing. And we've housed some refugees from Mexico and Guatemala quietly here in the deanery and the apartments that have been helpful in a transitional way for these people as they settle into life in the United States. And just a week ago, we received our next refugee from outside the United States, who is now safely housed. She's seeking asylum in this country and will probably receive it. And we're providing her housing and care and food during these days. It's a quiet ministry, but it's an important ministry that says something about who we are as a cathedral and, God willing, who we are as a nation. There were happy times over Christmas too. The Christmas concert, which was beautiful, the New Year's Eve concert, all virtual and online, and with the sweet Harry Smith talking to us in his usual way, and members of the New York Philharmonic. These are all ways that best we can, we carry out the cathedral's ministry of music and witness and word. One of the initiatives of love in action as we go forth into this year is something that's exciting and new and novel that we haven't done before. We're breaking ground here in ways that are important. And to that end, I've invited Pat Malloy, who's the sub-dean, who is really spearheading this, that's a violent image, who's really leading this initiative and who's done all the groundwork. He will tell you more about that. But first, and where's Jean-Sebastian? There's Jean-Sebastian, who's also going to be part of Pat's presentation. Jean-Sebastian is sitting in London right now, and we'll hear him in a little while. What we are venturing into here, well, let me talk about Pat for a second. Pat is the sub-dean. Pat is an amazing person. He's a lifelong Christian. He was formed in the Roman Catholic tradition. He became an Anglican, an Episcopalian, and an Episcopal priest, which he remains to this day. He is a Ph.D. from in liturgy and worship. He is the canon for liturgy and worship in the cathedral. He is leading us, building on the great tradition of worship here. He is leading us into solid Anglican worship. that is glorious and life-giving. He is busy as sub-dean, handling a variety of projects and initiatives and juggling 8 balls at once, including keeping the dean together. So I commend him for that, and I'm so thankful for his ministry. I first knew Pat when he was teaching at General Seminary, and we've known each other all these years now, and I am so pleased, honored, and joyful to have him in the role he's in now and bringing all the good things and great ministry to this cathedral. So we're talking about, and Pat's leading, forming an intentional community here at the cathedral, a community that is ecumenical in nature, involves Roman Catholics and Episcopalians and Anglicans and Methodists, that already has a model and is at work in England, and Pat will talk about that. But I want to say that what we are looking at here is a major ecumenical effort, probably the most major and bravest ecumenical venture in the last 50 years among the Roman Catholic and Anglican and Episcopal traditions. This is not something that anyone would have imagined 10 years ago, but suddenly it's not only imagined here, it's actually at work in England at Lambeth Palace in London. So I'm excited about this. We have, this has been talked about at the highest levels of the Episcopal Church, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and the Roman Church, the Bishop of Rome, are all aware of this and are in general support of this. So I'm going to stop talking. I'll go on forever, but I want Pat to pick up here, Pat, and tell us about the importance of this great initiative.
Thanks. Thank you, Bishop. So you talked about when we met. I'd like to say a word about that as well, because I think it says a lot. When I was at General Seminary, we used to get all dressed up every evening and process into evensong, and I was the dean at the time, and I was standing there getting ready to, and this man shows up in a suit and tie I'd never seen before, and I thought he was somebody who had wandered in off the street by accident. And I said, "Oh, hello, sir." I said, "What do you? How are you?" And we chatted a bit. And I said, "And what are you doing here?" And I thought he was going to say he was actually looking for something else and wandered into the seminary by accident. And he says, "Oh, I'm here for a meeting." And I said, "And what meeting is that?" He said, "The meeting of the Board of Trustees." And I said, "Oh, are you a trustee?" He said, "Yes, I am a trustee, a newly elected trustee." I said, "And who are you?" He said, "I'm Clifton Daniel, the Bishop of East Carolina." And I remember thinking to myself, the humility of this person is stunning. That this bishop wanders in and just, treats me, a lowly country parson, like I matter. And so ever since then, I've had just the greatest respect for Bishop Daniel, and I'm really lucky to call him my friend. So there we go. That's that story. So let me say something about this project. And I'll do it a little bit historically. Back in the early mid 1980s, when dinosaurs roamed the earth and I was working on my PhD, I went to Paris to look at some documents there that I couldn't see anywhere else. And Paris, like most of Europe, I think is largely secularized now. And I was just wandering around Paris one day, and I saw this throng of people going into a church in the middle of the day, which seemed awfully strange to me. So I followed them into the church. And I came to discover that this church had been defunct, it was derelict, and that this group of people asked the Archbishop of Paris if they could take it over and do something with it. And this group of people who took it over were members of a new Roman Catholic religious community called the Fraternity of Jerusalem. And they had so transformed this place that it became a sort of spiritual center for the people of Paris. This community, I won't go into a lot of detail, but I remember buying a book there about them because I was so fascinated. And the motto of the community is, in the heart of the city, in the heart of God. In the heart of the city, in the heart of God. And I thought, what a remarkable motto for what they're doing and what the church needs. And I remember thinking to myself, what they're doing here can transform the church. This is a way in which Christianity can thrive in a world where Christianity is, at least the kind of Christianity that we practice, is becoming increasingly irrelevant. But you know, how do you do something like that? And sort of that was the end of that. It was a pipe dream, and I read about them. And then I read that the Archbishop of Canterbury, many, many years later, had decided to gather together in his home in London at Lambeth Palace, a group of young people between the ages of 21 and 35, who would come and live there for just a year. And during that year, they would be formed deeply in ministry to people in need, to personal prayer and silence, and to living together in community. And I was fascinated. And I thought, you know, this is kind of a version of what was happening in Paris. But it's us. It's an Anglican thing. And in a way, it stands even more chance of being transformative because these people come and live, and then they go back into the world. And so I got a job at St. John the Divine. And I thought to myself, this is a place where in the Episcopal Church, this could happen. In this remarkable building, in this remarkable city, this could happen. And luckily, at the time, the dean had come, and I talked to him about this sort of vision of mine, and he was completely supportive of it. We then took it to the board. The board was completely supportive of it. And off I flew to London to spend some time with this community. Since then, as many of you know, the Archbishop of Canterbury, one day after morning prayer, the Archbishop of Canterbury walked up to me and said, you're the person from St. John the Divine in New York. And I said, I am. And he said, I need to talk to you. And the Archbishop then stood there in this narthex and talked to me for an hour. And the next day he came after me again and said, I want to talk to you more. And before I left Lambeth Palace, he said to me, this is so important for the Christian church internationally, the whole Christian church, that I want to do everything I can to support this venture. And so, as many of you know, the Archbishop then came to the cathedral, the first time he'd ever been here, to meet with a small group of people in the dean's house, in the deanery, to talk about his investment in us being able to do something in New York like he had done in London. I think the big difference is that in London, this is really in his house. I mean, Lambeth Palace, for as large as it is and as venerable as it is, really is his house. So that it's a very enclosed kind of thing. People come there. The difference here is this would be very out in the city, and it would be very public. It would be a witness to the whole city, and it could be, I think, transformative. When the Archbishop spoke to me in London all those many years ago, he said, you know, you can't do this yourself. He said, you have to have somebody else sort of run this for you because it's very complex and it's very work intensive. And you need people to run this who know what they're doing in terms of working with groups, in terms of ecumenism, in terms of spiritual formation, all those sorts of things. And he said, and the group you need is the group that I have running the program here at Lambeth Palace. And that's a group called Chemin Neuf. I confess to you, I'd never heard of Chemin Neuf. Chemin Neuf is a religious community made up of celibate men, celibate women, and married couples. who make vows to be together in community. Again, this is a new kind of religious community under the auspices of the Bishop of Rome, but not at all made up of Roman Catholics. It's made up of people of all sorts of different traditions. And he said, you need Chemin Neuf to do this for you if you're going to do it. And so lo and behold, he also told Chemin Neuf this, that they needed to work at St. John the Divine. And within no time at all, days of my coming back to the United States, I was talking to people in this international group. So we forged a relationship with Chemin Neuf. We forged a relationship with the Archbishop of Canterbury. And much to my surprise, especially through Chemin Neuf, we have forged a relationship with the Pope, who is recently, as a month and a half ago, has said that this is an initiative that he considers to be important and that he will support in any way that he can. And I know this because our contact, my primary contact in Chemin Neuf, a priest named Etienne Vito, had a meeting with the Pope about another matter, and this came up. So that's sort of a background. We have a guest today with us whom I'm not going to ask to speak quite yet, and that's Jean-Sebastian Laurent. Father Jean-Sebastian is a member of Chemin Neuf. He's a Roman Catholic priest currently working in London, who, when Chemin Neuf comes here to live on the property, will be a member of the small group that will come to help us to set all this up, and will be the point person for actually running the program. And so Father Jean-Sebastian actually is French, as his name would suggest, but Chemin Neuf sent him to London to work for a year to sort of acclimate him to the insanity of Anglo-Saxon culture and English language. But he will speak with us later. But first, you always, when you tell people you went on a trip, you always want to show them pictures. They don't want you to show them pictures because they don't want to be bored out of their minds. But nonetheless, I'm going to show you some pictures, and just a few, just to give you a visual sense of what all of this is like. So I'm going to pull up this slideshow now. And hold on just a second. Oh, that's the wrong one. So you should now see my white screen. Is that right? Good. So these are just a few images. So this is Lambeth Palace, and Lambeth Palace, as you said, it's sort of a pied-à-terre for the Archbishop of Canterbury in London, just a place to rest when he's in town. The Archbishop of Canterbury has had this property for 800 years, and the building was built in the oldest parts of the building, but in the early 15th century. So this is quite old. The Archbishop of Canterbury said when he moved in there, he told me, it felt like a chapel at one end, his apartment at the other, and an office building in between. And he just said, there's got to be something more fruitful that we can do with this property. And that's when he decided to create this community that would, in a sense, take it over. This is the entry to Lambeth Palace, just off the Lambeth Bridge. I show you this only to show it's how old it is. I mean, the door, you see that's the big door into the Archbishop's. Were smaller then, people were shorter. And so it's a very old and venerable place. You see now where it is in London. This is the Archbishop's Gardens, and you can see it's just across the Thames from Parliament. So it's very close. It's just very, very close to Westminster. This is that chapel that's at one end of the property. This is part of the oldest part of the building. As you can see, it's subterranean, very rustic, but extremely moving when you're there. And this chapel now is where the young people who come to form the community, this is where they pray every day. And prayer forms a big part of their life, especially times of silence, but not only prayer. This is one of the groups of young people. There they are with the Archbishop who come there every year. You can see, you can't see this necessarily, but they're from all over the world. Now we can't do that because of the current situation with immigration in the United States and because we're just getting started, but these people do come from all over the world. Here's another group of them, just thrilled as can be to be there at Lambeth Palace and starting their their year together. The Archbishop calls it a year in God's time. And those who have done this project, this program, will say that that's exactly how it feels to them. This is one of the people who's done the program. And I point him out to you. His name is Peter Angelica. Peter is an American. He was part of the first cohort at, they call it the Community of St. Anselm there. We'll have to find a different name here. So Peter went over there. He's an Episcopalian from New Jersey. There were 2 Americans in the first group. He was there, and Shannon Preston was there. Shannon is a priest, and Shannon actually had finished seminary and went there for a year because she said she felt like she'd gotten a great education in the seminary, but no spiritual formation, not a real spiritual formation, and she needed one. And so she went there to become part of the project. The reason I show you Peter is Peter now is in law school at Fordham, lives just around the corner here. And that was the Archbishop's vision, not that people who do this would go into the religion business like the Dean and I have done, but rather that they would go back into the world, transformed, deepened in their Christian commitment, knowing how to pray, to go out and make a difference in the world. And that's what Peter's doing now. Peter's in law school, and Peter will go out and be, I hope, a real leaven in the culture. This is the habit they wear when they go into chapel. It's just an alb with this cross on the back. But prayer is not all they do. And I wanted to point that the other thing they do is they live in community. They cook for one another every day. Here they are making lunch for one another, cleaning up for one another. They're on a rotation to do laundry for one another. They all throw their laundry into a common place. And once a week, every so often on the road, you do everyone's laundry. So it's real intense community living. And they also 2 days a week go out into London and work with people who are very needy, very disabled, very poor. Here, this is the L'Arche community, which you may know, where people who are disabled in some way live together in community. And they go and work. That's one of the ministries they do. But they also work with people in cancer hospitals for impoverished people, and drop-in centers for people who are drug addicted and alcoholic, single mothers. They do all sorts of work. And this is me with the Archbishop of Canterbury, my bud, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin and Pat, just having some fun together here. So that's it. Now, what I'd like to do now, if it's okay with you, is I would like to allow Father Jean-Seb, I'm trying to stop my share here, but not having much luck at it. There we go. So I'm wondering if we could have Father Jean-Sebastian just say a word about Chemin Neuf, because he's a member of that community, and then maybe we can just take some questions.
Yeah, thank you, Pat. And it's nice to see every one of you. It's very impressive to see such a crowd. As Pat was saying, I am calling right now from London. It's the evening already. And I'm here. I've been ordained a priest 4 months ago, and I am now serving in a Catholic parish in the north of London near Barnet, for those who know. And I'm also helping with the Lambeth Palace project. So not always in person because of the London lockdown, but I am following them, following the group of young people who are right now doing the project in the community project in Lambeth. So Chemin Neuf is a community which obviously was born in France, as you may say, according to the name. Chemin Neuf in French, it means the new way. It's just the name of the streets where the community was born 50 years ago. It's a street called in Lyon, in France, in 1973, and the first house of this where this community was settled was in the Montée du Chemin Neuf. So this is where the community has its name. Very early, it was made of men and women, celibates, but also very early some families joined the community to experience community life. And today, and then the community developed abroad in Africa first, in other European countries after. Nowadays, the community gathers more or less 2,000 people in 30 countries. and about 450 of them are consecrated celibates, men and women. And the rest of the committed members are couples who are members of the community, and experimenting community life. Our community is ecumenical. The proportion of non-Catholic members really depends on the countries where we are. For example, here in the United Kingdom, half of the members of our community are Anglicans and half of the members are Catholics. In Russia, they're mostly Orthodox. In Germany, they're mostly Lutherans. So it depends on the countries where our community is settled. I don't know what else could I say. The last country where our community is settled since September is Uganda. But mostly up to now, our community is settled mostly in French-speaking countries, but not only. I would say half of the countries are French-speaking and half of the other countries are non-French-speaking countries.
And Father Jean-Sebastian, I do have a question. So where are you currently in the United States?
Nowhere. We have, in fact, it's not completely true. We have a committed couple who lives in California, but they're like, it's not a very regular way of living community life. It's just because there's not yet a community community Shomenov in the United States, but this couple who are non-Catholics, they're Pentecostals, they really wanted to be part of our community. So up to now, they have, a commitment, a special commitment that enables them to be members of their community, despite the fact that we are not really present. But we have missions, ministries in the United States that we are leading, even though there is not a house of the community.
So this would be your first house?
Yeah. The first house of the community will be New York, St. John of the Vine.
So I think we want to get to some questions that people have been sending in. Thank you, Father Long. The first question is recruitment. How are we going to find people who hope to be members of the community?
Well, one of the great things about this is that they've already done it in England. So we aren't starting from scratch. I think that if when Shomenov comes, Shomenov would be here for a full year before we bring in participants in the program. So we'd work with Shomenov to find a way to invite people and then to screen them in all sorts of ways and come up with a very tight little group to start. When the Archbishop of Canterbury announced this, he had tens of thousands of applications, and they had to whittle it down to, 15. So it's a really rigorous sort of whittling project on the basis of people's suitability to live together, people's genuine interest, people's mental health, frankly. All those sorts of things would be taken into account. So we'd have to come up with a sort of an advertising model and then a screening process. Mm-hmm.
And the other question is, how do you anticipate the community members will interact with the larger cathedral community?
Oh, that's a really good question. Well, in the Archbishop's house, they gather to pray 3 times a day. Well, first of all, they get up in the morning, they spend an hour in silence together, and then they say morning prayer, and then they go off about their days, and they get together for the Eucharist. And in the evening, then they get together for to pray again and spend just time in silent meditation. That would all become very public at the cathedral. So that would all be happening in the cathedral where, anyone who walks by could be part of this. But also because of the social ministries they do, I imagine that they would very much contribute to the social ministries that we already do, not only here. I think they would go out into the city as well, but I think we have ACT and CCC and other kinds of ministries. This year I was talking to someone who said, it's this huge garden at Lambeth Palace, and it's tended by a conservancy, believe it or not. And there were some members of the community of St. Anselm who became fascinated with the gardens. And so now some of them have sort of apprenticed themselves to the gardeners and are learning how to, to tend these ancient trees and such. And I can imagine some of them working with Marilyn. I think there are lots of ways that they become part of the life of this place. I mean, you turn, say 10 to start with, 10 young people loose here. I mean, the ways they can become involved are so many. Including coming to worship with us on Sunday, although at least at Lambeth Palace, because it is ecumenical, people go to the churches of their own traditions on Sunday, so they wouldn't necessarily all come here, but I would think on any given Sunday, they'd be sort of a witness to us when we can come back together and pray in person.
Pat, a question that we had written down. Do you want to talk a little bit about housing at the cathedral and a little bit about fundraising? Sure.
The cathedral, as all of you know, the cathedral is there's a lot of space, lots of space, but the space is sort of chopped up in a certain way. So I think one of our tasks during the year after Sheminith comes here and gets settled will be to figure out how to use the spaces we have to house the members of the community who would come. And that's going to require, I think, an investment in redoing spaces. I mean, we have lots of space, but that doesn't mean it's habitable space. And so I think that will be one of our challenges. And that will, of course, mean we will have to raise funds. And we will also have to raise funds. The students are asked to bring money. In a sense, it's like a gap year, and they're asked to bring money. And in London, what they discovered is that many of the students simply couldn't bring much money because they come from, especially those who come from Africa, simply can't. I've talked to Dan Matthews about this, and he has the idea that one of the ways we could fundraise is to ask people to sponsor a student, sort of scholarships, endowed scholarships or scholarships just for a year. So I think there are all sorts of fundraising opportunities, both in terms of capital and in terms of then supporting the students. And the money that the students bring goes to things like hiring faculty, because they do classes every afternoon, unbelievably sophisticated theological and sociological, anthropological education, and their food and supporting the people in Sheminith who would oversee the program along with us, not apart from us. So I think there are lots of fundraising opportunities here.
And our next question, Pat, is what do you see as the timeline for getting this really off the ground?
Well, Father Jean-Sebastian can tell you that the International Council of Sheminith is committed to sending 3 members of Sheminith here in September, as well as perhaps a 4th. They have told me that there was a member of the Church of the Nazarene, of all things, somewhere in the South who's interested in joining their community, who might be able to come here and live with them to see if in fact there's a fit there. What we in the old days, I don't know if you would call this a postulant, who would come and live. And then a year after that, we would bring the first cohort of people into the young people to form the intentional community. So it's really 2 years.
So we have one last question from one of our community here is, what do you expect the cost would be per student?
Oh, that's now I'm going to tell you, this is going to be somewhat shocking. So they've discovered in London that they really lowballed that when they started. And they discovered that essentially, when all is said and done, you're talking $34,000 a person, US dollars, because you have to fly them in, you have to feed them, you've got to keep up the property, you've got to pay for their faculty, you've got to, they may prepare the food, but they have to also buy the food. So just the cost of housing someone, totally taking care of them in London for a year, costs about $34,000. And I imagine New York is comparable.
Okay. So I think we're a minute away from our ending time. So, oh, pardon?
I want to say one last word in 20 seconds. And that is, this I showed you the Love Must Act mask. And this is one way in this place that I believe love must act and can act for the benefit of those who participate in the community, for the cathedral as it leads and houses the community, and for the broader church, the Roman Church, the Anglican the Church of England, the Episcopal Church, can enter into a new era of what it means to be in community and communion with one another. And as I was driving down 10th Avenue last week, on the side of a building, there's a large sign at 10th Avenue and 46th Street that says, "Be fearless in pursuing what sets your soul on fire." And this is something that can set souls on fire and set the soul of this cathedral on fire for the good of the world and the good of the church. So, hooray. Pat, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Dan.
Any questions, always feel free to contact me, and I'm happy to answer any questions. If you'd like to get involved, please reach out. And lastly, I wanted to just let you all know that next Tuesday at 3 p.m., we're inviting people to stop by the cathedral steps to light a candle for the inauguration. And this is something that, we see as individuals coming up. It won't be a group of people. And then that will culminate in a very short service at 5:15 on the steps. And it's just our way of giving people space to just note the inauguration, note the sort of tumultuous events surrounding it. And please feel free to stop by if you'd like to participate.
And could I say too, if you'd like to speak to me about this project, feel free to email me. And our email addresses are all the same. It's first initial, last name. So it's PMALLOY@stjondivine.org. All of our email addresses are the same. So I wouldn't use my phone number because I'm hardly ever in an office these days. But I really, if you were to write to me at PMALLOY@stjondivine.org, I'd be happy to get right back to you.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. And we're planning our next event, which will be in a couple of weeks. And we hope to see you back here.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.